This one is for all of my fathers out there, but it's not just, it really is predominantly for my fathers out there, but it's also for all of us men, because most men I'm finding today really have some father wounds. And there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's majority of the reasons come around the fact that the men who raised us weren't necessarily equipped with the ability to really be emotionally intelligent fathers and understand that the way that they were raised came from a very different environment and what was needed for men, not in wartime or scarcity, was very different. Because we didn't grow up in a significant, like I fought in the war, right? Like obviously I was overseas for almost a decade, but that war wasn't on our doorstep. Like that war wasn't like it was in World War II. And World War II created a breed of men who had to step up in extreme adversity. I remember reading about the World War II and leading up to that. And I believe it was the Nazis basically referred to the United States as Boy Scouts, right? Like we didn't really have any business being in a war. Not only did we not have any business being in a war, we were incapable of really fighting in a war. So they had almost paid us no mind when it came to the fact of how big of a threat we were to their regime. So that being said, what really came out of that was the men that had to step up and go against a very, very tough power in Nazi Germany were then brought back home after this excruciatingly painful and high casualty war, brought back home to then have to raise children in a time where the economy was very depleted because they had to boost their war efforts. And everybody was just trying to get back to work and find some form of normalcy to then put food on the table, plus a heightened awareness of still being in a war mentality, which is why, most of us still even grew up with them, was, they would do the sound the alarm stuff, and you'd have to get under the tables as if there was an attack, or we grew up and there was also earthquakes in California, so we had to do that. But those were things that we grew up with, and that was held over from older times. So when we look at where our fathers came from that group of men, we have to say, well, what was it that they were really equipped with? And when I see all these men, today that have a lot of father issues, the one thing that we fail to acknowledge was, what were our dads equipped with, right? Like, what was given to them? What didn't they know? And during the time that they were growing up, they didn't have the access to the information that we have. They didn't have the insurmountable studies and things that we've done nowadays and stuff like that. Like, even just looking at masculinity in general, think about your father right now and his age. Guess what? Masculinity's sociological studies didn't even start till the 1970s. So how can you believe that this guy had a leg up on really defining who he was as a man, or even researching that? Like, not to mention, majority of our parents grew up in very blue collar environments because college wasn't as big of a thing back then. There was no push really for college because we needed people getting back to work to get the economy raised, right? So we have to understand that a lot of that stuff is actually more new aged, in the sense of, this is where we are now, not what we were raised with and what the people who were raising us were given. And so we have to look at their environments. And so for the first time, we need to take a step back and be an observer and understand what our fathers were given, what our fathers were handed, how they were raised, what was the environment. We have to acknowledge all of these things, because while they may not have been the greatest, my father wasn't the greatest, he wasn't a bad dad, but he wasn't really present. He wasn't around. He did his own stupid shit and was drinking and would work on cars all the time and be in the garage. And then us kids were kind of left with each other, and then my mom, and then we had our cousins and stuff, which we loved playing and everything like that. But we didn't have a great male role model in our father. He wasn't, and he still isn't the one who helped me write my story as a man. That was actually my uncle. But when we look at this, we really need to understand what was given to them, how they were raised, and then if that's what they were equipped with, why doesn't it make sense what they tried to equip us with? You know? And having a little bit of empathy for that. Now, obviously, there's some real nasty and bad fathers, so we're not giving anybody a free pass on that shit. We're just trying to come to terms with the fact that if we have father wounds, the first part of healing that father wound is understanding the father himself. And if we look to him and say, okay, I see you, Dad. I see what you were given. Well, the next step is understanding that what he gave you or what he attempted to give you wasn't because out of malice, or it wasn't because he knew better. It's because he didn't know any better. It's because he was giving you what he knew and what was expected of his generation. And so as we heal the father wound, we then need to come to the realization that that doesn't have to be our story. And we're in a time right now where we have the ability like this YouTube or Instagram or podcast or whatever modalities we have to learn more about masculinity or learn more about how to be a man or learn or find more mentors, find more people who can show us the things that we couldn't have learned from our fathers. They didn't have that stuff. We have that availability. So it's our time to say, okay, as a father, it's cool. Like, I need to accept what his limitations were and be able to come to forgiveness for him. And then that allows me to be my own father, to then nurture myself and say, okay, now I can give myself the father that he never was. And when we do that, we're able to say that we have the ability to be that supporting figure, that mentor, that guide. That is what we get to be for ourselves and say that we have all of this inside of us. We don't need to look externally to him and blame him for where we sit. We can say, no, I'm going to take responsibility for that. And then I'm going to be the man that I need. I'm going to be the father that I need. And in turn, when we can become the father that we need for ourselves, we become the father that we needed when we were younger, and then we give that to our younger generation. That is how we heal the father wound. That is how we can accept what it is that we came from and move forward from it. Because the longer that we stay in resentment and victim and hatred for our fathers or whatever you're sitting with your dad, the longer we stay in that, the longer we can never move past it. And the longer we can never become the fathers that we needed to then give ourselves a life. And then we can never become the fathers that our kids need, so we can give them a leg up and allow them to flourish and be who they authentically are, because they're not having to heal a father wound down the road. So understanding that the father wound, if you are carrying that right now, it is your turn and choice to stop the father wound. It is your turn and your choice to heal it in yourself, and then to find a new way to be the father for you and for the younger generation. But that all comes with the fact that we get to accept what the limitations were of the man that raised us. And we have our own limitations so long as we choose to not do any work on ourselves. Because you can't become the father that you needed, and you can't become the father that the next generation needs if you're not willing to sit down and reflect on not only how you were raised, but who you are today. How you show up for the people in your life, how you show up for yourself, how you show up as a man in every situation. What does he look like? How is he acting? Is he giving the same shit that your father gave? Are you running from the things your father was, so much so that you're actually creating an entire circle and giving that to your children in a different way? How many of you have thought about this? Most guys don't. And it's not to judge or say that, that's not okay. It's to say, guys, we have to be aware of these things. And once we're aware of it, we can move. We can move to the next step. We can move to the next generation. We can forgive ourselves. Because that's the other piece to this, is that we need to be able to forgive ourselves for maybe the way we've acted or behaved. Because we didn't know any better, because the men that raised us didn't know any better. And we didn't realize that we were perpetuating a problem until it became a problem. And when we have that awareness of that it became a problem, we can then move to the next step of saying, wow, I can forgive myself. I didn't know any better. I was given a set of tools that weren't right. I was given limitations that were incorrect. I lived by those for a while. And most of us do now. I know that I still work through limitations that were given to me. And that's okay. That's what life's about, guys. It's never a finished product. It's always work. But we can make the work easier, and we can put ourselves in a better position, and we can give the next generation an advantage if we sit there and allow ourselves to forgive ourselves and to forgive our fathers. Because that's a wound that doesn't need to continue. That is a wound that we can heal and we can move from, and we can change the trajectory of everything else. Of our lives, of the next generation's lives, we can change that. So be the father that you needed by healing the father wound you were given. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. Be that father, guys. Step up. You want to tell me you're a good dad. You say that I do everything for my kids, but if you're not doing the work for yourself, you're not doing shit for your kids. You're lying to yourself and you're lying to them. Do the work on yourself, and then I'll believe that you're doing the work for the kids. Until next time.